Hey everybody, welcome to, I almost forgot the month, May, our May webinar. I'm already in June mode, but welcome to our May webinar. These are free webinars, and this one we've gotten a lot of interest from people out there. We're dissecting a clinical trial feasibility survey, and it's pretty, it's actually harder than it seems. We get these surveys all the time, but obviously these are confidential, so we can't actually go through a real feasibility survey. So we've got Amy to create slides, and I'm going to share the slides right now so we can go through them and give you a good idea of what to expect when you're doing a feasibility survey. So hopefully you guys can see the slides. Let me know in the chat. And if you're an attendee listening in the chat, if you logged in with your computer, you'll be able to see the slides. Okay, thank you. If you called in, you obviously can't see the slides, but this will go on YouTube later. This will also go on the podcast, Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru, if you just want to listen. And everyone who registered is going to get a replay link immediately after the webinar is over. So you'll have the slides. Even if you called in, you're still going to have the slides available for you to look at. So Chris is here as well. I'm not by myself.
Hello.
Chris Sauber is here. We are answering client questions about feasibility surveys. So we have a consulting firm that actually does feasibility surveys for our clients, or we assist them on filling out their feasibility surveys. It's an extremely important topic that I can't believe we never actually had a webinar on. We've done them on SSVs. We've yet to do one on feasibility.
Have you ever done a video on feasibility questionnaires?
I have talked about them, but I don't know if I dissected. No. So this is a first. This is good. So thank you everyone for joining. So first slide, which were wonderfully designed by Amy.
Whose idea was it to do this particular topic?
Mine.
Okay.
It's something I always wanted to do, but we've been getting a lot of the same questions from our clients over and over, sure. Or just not even our clients, just people watching or listening. So the process of acquiring new studies. When a site is in the process of acquiring new studies, sponsors will send to prospective sites a CDA. Okay, this is a confidentiality disclosure agreement. You've got to fill this out. You've got to usually get it, or NDA. Don't get caught up in semantics. You're going to get a form that says don't share this information with other sites or our competitors, more importantly, right? So you can't share the protocol with their competitors. You actually can't share the protocol synopsis with anyone outside of your organization. Now, that doesn't mean you can't share the study lead with someone else.
True.
You just can't violate the confidentiality. But you can say, hey, Chris, my site has this study for diabetes. We just got a feasibility survey. Do you want to follow up with the person who sent it to me? Here's her email.
Sure.
Okay. I'm not violating CDA. I'm not sending you a synopsis. I'm not telling you anything about the study other than the indication and who it's from.
Yep.
Right? A protocol synopsis. So make sure you get the CDA sent out. Don't let it sit in your inbox for weeks. Or months. I don't care how good your site is. Unless you're a key opinion leader, they will skip over you and go to someone else.
Yep.
99.9% of the time.
Probably higher.
Probably lower, but there's a lot of KOLs out there that sponsors really want to get studies.
Sure, but you said outside of that.
Outside of that, 100. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly.
Okay, so get the CDAs out, get the synopsis, and then do the feasibility survey, feasibility questionnaire, site qualification questionnaire, or site survey. They're called a bunch of different things. They're basically questions going through your site's capabilities. So let's get into what they ask. Okay. It's a questionnaire sent to the site by a sponsor in order to determine whether a site is qualified to conduct the study, as well as to project the site's enrollment. The answers to the survey will determine if the site will be considered for the study, and project how many patients the sponsor can expect to be enrolled at the site should they be granted the study. Okay.
What's the most important aspect of that questionnaire?
Patient numbers, projections.
Absolutely.
How many can you get? And are we going to spend some time talking about that?
We are, okay.
Yeah. Key facts. Surveys, typically about 7 to 10 pages. Right? Is Amy right on that one? They're all over the place.
Yeah, all over the place.
On average.
I couldn't really tell you if there's an average. I've seen many a 1 page. I've seen many a 10 page. So I don't know.
Lately, they've all been online, right? But very few are still paper surveys.
I've seen maybe 1 or 2 that were just paper in the last year. But yes, vast majority are online.
Online. So you'll get a link. Sometimes you'll get a password. The CRAs will review and determine during the SSV and the SIV whether what the site put in the feasibility is accurate. This is where you and your PI need to be on the same page. Because at your SSV, if they're a good CRA, if they're an organized CRO or a sponsor, they're going to have a copy of your completed survey that the CRA will look at and confirm the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you put on your survey that you can enroll 20 patients in a study, and then when they ask your PI at the SSV and she only says 2, they're going to, there's a disconnect, and then they're going to question. So a SSV is a site selection visit. Sorry.
Many different abbreviations for this, right? There's
SSV, SQV,
PSV, SQV. I mean, there's probably 10.
Right. SSV, PSSV, SQV. That's all site selection visit. Okay. And then a SIV is site initiation visit. Okay. So it's important to keep a copy of your answers from the feasibility survey. Either take screenshots if it's a link of every page and then print them out. Or if you can print them out, sometimes they don't let you print them out.
Right.
You've got to screenshot every window, or just write them down somewhere. I don't care how you do it.
You don't need to screenshot every window. Just screenshot your projections.
That's what they're going to ask you. You don't need to screenshot your address and your phone number. You already know that.
Hopefully you get the same answer as what you put on there.
Yeah, hopefully you know that. Okay, if you don't know that part, it's going to be a very difficult webinar for you.
And site selection visit.
And definitely a very difficult site selection visit. Okay, so the most important questions on the survey are, how many patients can your site screen and enroll per month? Now, they always ask these things, right? How many patients are in your PI? How many patients are your PI or sub-I seeing per month that could meet the eligibility criteria? This assumes that your PI or sub-Is actually have private practice. If they don't, there's ways around this, and we're going to talk about it.
They still kind of assume that the doctor has a database.
So
right?
Explain.
So if you strictly have a research site, right? There's no private practice there whatsoever. They assume the doctor has a practice somewhere in the community, and they want to know the database size for that particular practice, right? So yeah, they're always assuming that there's a database associated with the doctor, and that may not be true, right? Say the doctor's semi-retired, and all they're doing is research. So what happens in that case? Patient database.
Okay.
So in that case, you get a little tricky.
And so many, and feel free to ask any questions, but obviously patients, how many your projections are the most important thing the sponsor cares about. But if your PI and sub-I have a private practice, or if they don't, you need to incorporate somebody who does have a private practice that's going to be a sub-I for you, because then you could talk about their practice and answer this question.
Absolutely agree. Or as I've seen oftentimes, you can lie too. So long as the PI is willing to back that lie up.
So explain this, because people are, you're telling them to lie. Can you explain what
Well,
you're
I'm not
talking
telling
about?
them to lie. It's just what I've seen.
Clear distinction here. We're not telling anyone to lie. But explain. Give them the story.
Sure. So if you and the PI are on the same page, and it's all about the numbers here, right? How many numbers can we recruit for this trial? Most likely, at some point, there's going to be at least an exaggeration, if not a flat-out lie involved. So if you fill out the feasibility questionnaire and say, in Dan's example, you can get 20 patients, and the PI says, no, we can only get 2 patients for this trial, well, somebody's going to have to give a little, right? And that's most likely going to have to be the PI.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have to confirm that 20, or she.
And if you get caught in one of these lies or get put in a corner, an easy out for you as the site owner would be, well, that's our PI's database, but if you start including our sub-I's databases, this is where we got our projections
And
from.
community outreach and any number of other sources.
So if you get cornered, you got to know how to get out of it. And so just know that when you're doing these surveys, they're asking you everything about your PI, your PI's database, how many patients your PI is seeing. Sometimes they ask about other staff or your site's database, but you can combine your sub-I's private practice as well. We do it all the time, right?
Yes, but the most important number, right, aside from your sub-I's databases and community outreach and advertising, the most important number is that PI's database, right? Secondly is the sub-I's database, right? Community outreach and advertising and all of those things, they want to hear about that, but you want to tell them 80% of your patients are going to come via a database.
Right.
Most particularly the PI's database.
Right. Now, sponsors use these numbers to determine whether they need to bring on more sites and CRAs. This is why if you are a site and you projected to enroll 20, and they will confirm this again at the site selection visit, and they'll give you one more opportunity to confirm it at the site initiation visit. Okay, if you are site A, and then there's another site, site B, you both got the study. Site A promises 10 patients. Site B promises 4 patients. Okay, let's say site A only enrolls 8, and site B enrolls what they said they would, 4. Site A is actually going to be penalized for future studies because they
don't know if I agree with that.
They overestimated their project. No, I've been told this by sponsors.
I still don't know if I agree with that. Go ahead.
Sure, I have, because they base their projections off of these numbers.
Sure.
So if there was any issues with enrollment study-wide, which, by the way, 90% of trials have issues.
Oh, absolutely.
They're going to blame those sites that overestimated their projections.
Sure. So there could be some negative consequences associated with overestimating your patient population. However, I really don't think it's I don't think it's that huge a negative. I absolutely could be wrong. I've never been on the CRO or sponsor side of things. But when you really penalize is when you enroll nothing, right? A big fat 0.
Correct.
That's when you're really penalized. So I mean, sure, they're basing all their data and their numbers on what every site's told them. I'm not too concerned if I overestimate and come in a little under that, so long as we get at least 1.
Yeah, this is why it's important to lower expectations at your SIV. All right, because that's literally your last opportunity to give them your real projections.
Okay.
No one wants to underestimate on their survey,
sure,
which is another topic we need to talk about, because it's well known in the industry that everyone embellishes their capabilities.
Absolutely.
And you kind of have to do that.
So, but what happens?
And you're not going to hear this anywhere else, but this podcast webinar, you're not going to hear this from anyone else.
And it's absolutely guaranteed expected that sites exaggerate their capabilities. But let's say you're, in your example here, 20 and 2, right? Site director filled out the feasibility questionnaires 20. PI says 2. The site director gets the PI to increase their number to 20. So now it's site initiation visit, right? The site selected. Now they go, okay, well, let's go with our actual number of 2, right? That's a huge decline from 20 to 2.
But you got the study already.
Okay, so how do you explain that?
I don't even know if they will ask for an explanation. I think what's implied is that, because I've done this many times.
I know you have. How do you explain from 20 to 2?
I've rarely been asked to explain.
Yeah.
I've just.
What if you were?
I would say, now that we're like
An
able to
actual
look at
authentic review. Of
no,
the
now that we're
database?
able to get familiar with the protocol and actually discuss the protocol with all of our staff, all the sub-Is, all the people that are not really going to be involved but are going to be involved in recruiting, we come to this more realistic projection because of, and oftentimes the clinicians have real concerns about the protocol.
Sure.
Maybe inclusion criteria 9 or exclusion criteria 16.
But they do ask about that in the feasibility questionnaire.
In the surveys, they don't know. So these studies are often created by academics, and
But
they don't
do ask that question. Is there any specific inclusion or exclusion criteria that concerns you?
Right, but everyone knows that no one's really focused on something that they're not guaranteed to have as a project until they actually get it.
And I would agree with that.
So maybe you're only spending like half of your resources on analyzing the synopsis, but once you get it, you're closer to 100% of your resources allocated to that, and your projections can change.
So I got a question kind of on a tangent here.
Yeah.
From the CRO or sponsor perspective, how do you get a more realistic expectation from sites? Do you pay the sites to do the feasibility questionnaires?
No. It's going to sound crazy and way out of left field, but technology is going to eliminate this problem. The blockchain is going to eliminate this. The blockchain and sharing data anonymously through electronic medical record databases. They're going to force sites to use these in the future.
I don't see how that would eliminate the exaggeration.
Because there'll be no need to ask. The sponsors can pre-screen patients through each site's database right then and there.
So, but that would be against HIPAA to allow them access.
No. Not when they're de-identified. And on the blockchain. This is what I just interviewed a guy from Metadata.
Yeah, I understand
This is not theory, by the way.
Sure.
They're doing this.
Yeah.
This is not theory.
Okay, but what about when you have a site that, and they do give studies when you say you don't technically have a database,
right?
So what do they do then?
You're probably not going to get the study, or you better have a good reason to add that site when you have no numbers to back it up. I'm not talking about 2018, 2019. I'm talking 2028, 2029. You'll see the blockchain and EMRs.
I understand what you're saying.
They're going to change this.
So how do you get every physician in the country to upload their medical records of all patients to this thing?
It's going to be the research sites, not all physicians.
Okay.
And they're all moving towards that anyways, like all of them. Some are slowly moving, but they are.
Sure, I mean, they have EMR, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But so you convert that EMR, how do you convert that EMR to blockchain?
It's just stored on the blockchain. So, and then.
But that's not de-identified.
It is de-identified.
No, when it's on EMR.
It's going to be de-identified. There's going to be another filter to make it de-identified for the sponsors to view. View only, de-identified. And going back to your incentive, how do you incentivize sites to opt in? You pay them to do this. The ones that are going to want to do it are going to do it. Again, this is just speculation, but sure. It's the only way for sponsors, because you asked. It's the only way. And
I am curious.
And this is a deep rabbit hole, too.
Sure.
The only way to ensure 100% accurate feasibility surveys, and even then, they're not 100% accurate. They're just accurate as to the numbers.
More so than they are now.
Yes, they're just accurate as to the numbers. They're not accurate as to the site's capabilities of communicating study opportunities to patients.
Or
some sites are better,
patients in,
or having the time. Some sites are better than others at doing that.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
What this will do is at least give the sponsors and CROs accurate database numbers.
Sure. When a site says that I have 300 patients that would qualify for the study,
right.
The sponsor can see if that number true.
Right. And this is going to be just like eSource is starting to get into the mix. This used to be like fantasy 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're starting to see it. We have a study here that's using eSource, another one starting soon. This is next. Again, this industry is extremely slow to adopt, so we've got 10, 15 years of not having to worry about it, but maybe not.
Sure.
The guy from Metadata says actually much less than that.
That wouldn't be good.
No, there will be no need for this webinar at that point, right? But we still got 10 years. So you better learn how to do this, people, because they're going to ask you these questions. And so getting to the sites embellishing, right? Mm-hmm. You're almost encouraged to do this now.
Not encouraged, you have to.
So give them the story of when we did a survey one time, we put our actual accurate numbers. Tell them what happened.
So when you're in this industry as a site, hopefully at some point in time, you'll develop a very good relationship with a number of different sponsors or CROs. And they'll pretty much give you any study you want, right, that they have. And we have such a relationship with one sponsor at one of the sites Dan and I own. And so we can be legitimate, 100% honest with our answers. These are our projections. And the sponsor had this CRA that was not familiar with our site, just had been hired by this company, came out and did the site selection visit. And she said, you said you're only going to enroll 2 patients. And I said, yes, that's correct. And she looked at me like, why am I even here doing a site selection visit for your site? You should, I mean, that was the look on her face. Anyhow, so she left. She spoke to a senior CRA at that company who said, because the CRA that did the site selection visit said she wasn't going to recommend our site. And the senior CRA told her, well, you should, because they will get the study, you'll just look bad. So she changed it from she wasn't going to recommend us to she was. Mm-hmm. And then when she came back to our site, because she did the site initiation visit as well, and the senior CRA had told us that she wasn't going to select or recommend our site. The senior CRA had told us this. So I asked her, how come you weren't going to recommend us? She said, well, your number was 2, and if that's your exaggerated number, it must be 0 or 1. How can I recommend you?
This was her actual words.
Yes.
Not what you thought she was thinking.
Exactly. And I said to her, what do you mean exaggerated number? She goes, well, all sites exaggerate. We know this. So this was straight from the horse's mouth.
So this goes on every single day, folks. Again, Amy's last bullet point here. It's better to be conservative and then exceed their expectations rather than give the sponsor huge expectations and then fall short.
Fine line, though.
There is a fine line because most of this webinar, we're talking about sites are embellishing their numbers, and for you to remain competitive, you should do the same. It sounds horrible to say.
To a degree. I agree with Amy. I would. So what I tell people, if you're going to exaggerate or embellish your numbers, do so at 30%. Mm-hmm. Whatever your real number is, embellish by 30%.
And this is why it's important to network. You don't want to be an outlier. Okay, you don't want to be, how, like, you ever seen those graphs, like cluster graphs, where there's like an average and then there's outliers.
Sure.
There's, there's people projecting too high, too low of enrollment, and then there's everyone in the middle. Mm-hmm. You actually want to be in the middle.
Sure.
Okay, you definitely don't want to be on the low end, and you don't want to be on the high end unless you can back it up.
Yeah, unless that's realistic.
Yes. So, but the problem is you don't know where that graph is. You don't have access to this data.
That's why I say only embellish by 30%, because that's what you would expect from everybody else.
But this is also why it's so important to network with other people in the industry doing the same kind of studies.
Sure.
Because then you can talk and say, hey, I used to do this all the time. I had someone that we would share studies with, and we would say, hey, what did you put for this survey? Okay. Mm-hmm. And then he would say, oh, and one of my other colleagues put this too. And I would say, yeah, another one that I talked to said his colleague put this. So we would get some data. It's rudimentary, but it's better than flying blind.
Sure.
But if you go to investigator meetings, and you obviously at investigator meetings, it's the best place for you to network with other people doing similar studies. And yes, you're competing, but you're not really competing because they have to use all these sites anyways, right? So it's better to share your knowledge with other people.
I don't think that's a competition.
And this is one of the things we do. One of the advantages of sites hiring us to do their surveys. We have this data.
Absolutely.
We're doing the surveys.
But getting back to that, I don't think it's really a competition because, like you said, they're going to fulfill their site goal regardless of what it is. Mm-hmm. They're not really competition. I mean, if
you're only competing when it's like someone local in your market.
Yep.
You're competing for patients. But as far as competing for the sponsors for the same study,
There's no competition because they're going to get their 50 sites or 100 or whatever it is they want.
With or without you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's no competition there, really.
So this is important why you should network, or why you should have, if you're brand new, you should hire someone like us to do this for you.
But why I recommend 30% is because if your realistic number is 10, I would say 13, because if you truly can get 10, at least you believe so, then if you put a little extra effort in, you can get to that 13, right?
Yeah.
You do some advertising, you do some networking with other sites in the area, community outreach, you can get 13.
Yeah, this next slide, Amy is presenting this hypothetical situation of exactly what we just described, right? Site A projected 20 patients, only enrolled 5. Site B projected 5, enrolled 5. Site B is looked at much better than Site A.
In that scenario, yes, but if you increase Site A to 10 patients enrolled,
yeah,
I think it's a trade-off.
Just be careful, everyone.
Sure.
These are things that, and there's no real consensus on that. Every sponsor is different. Every CRO looks at sites differently. It's not just about your numbers. It becomes more about the PI and is she or he a KOL?
Yeah, is the data good?
Is the data good? Right.
Number one is the numbers, though.
But they're tracking everything too, like time you respond to queries.
Yep.
So, but this is just in the vacuum that we're in right now of feasibility surveys, right? Anything else on the surveys besides patient? We've exhausted the patient numbers because that's the most important thing. But what else do they ask on these surveys? I know they ask about PI qualifications, studies you've done. Let's say the PI's never been a PI before, but he's been a sub-I.
Sure.
How do you answer that
Depends
question?
on how the question's phrased, right? Because sometimes they'll ask prior research experience. Other times they'll ask specifically how many studies have you been PI for. Okay, so it depends on how the question's phrased. When it's how many studies as a PI, so again, I would probably tell the truth here, but if you're going to lie, you better have a way to back that up.
Yeah. Obviously, your PI is not going to have experience as a PI until he or she does. Right? So if it's a research naive PI, this is why those phase 4 studies are so important.
Or at least be a sub-I on other trials.
At least, right?
Yeah.
And if they're not, but the coordinator is, you want to emphasize that at your site selection.
Hard to do on paper, though.
Hard to do on paper, hard to do in a survey. It's actually impossible to do. I know some sites that just take the coordinator's experience and put it as the PI's.
That's what I'm saying. If you're going to lie, you better have a way to back this up.
Yeah.
Not recommending that, though.
What other things besides, because those are the two big ones, and here's some other stuff. Okay, so site name and address, that's easy. Hopefully you don't have a problem with that. Investigator information and experience. We just discussed this. Okay.
Looks like you're getting a number of questions.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Staff info and experience. Same thing, right? Coordinator. Sub-I experience. Pharmacist, if any. Site's past experience with this sponsor and CRO.
Sure.
One thing that's not on here. Oh, no, it is on here. How many studies are currently running at the site?
Yeah.
What are they looking for there?
How is the workload divvied up?
Workload.
How many coordinators do you have?
Workload. We've had a webinar on this. Assessing coordinators' workload. Very important.
And that question is typically phrased, how many studies does your coordinators handle? And what's the maximum you allow them to handle? Something along those lines.
Question. Do they prefer a site with a lot of coordinators?
I would say yes.
I would say that's better than too few.
But again, it depends on, so if you have one coordinator, but you only have 1 or 2 active studies, right?
Right.
That's not that big of a deal.
And we've done an entire webinar on coordinator workload, assessing workload. Just, you can YouTube it. Obviously, it's better to have more staff than less from the perspective of a sponsor.
Sure.
But when you start, and another question we got was about the sub-Is. How often do you have a sub-I on your trials? Do you recommend using one as often as possible? The answer is yes, because they want MD oversight. A coordinator is usually not a doctor, so they can't have medical oversight. So it's better to have help for the PI by having an MD. But what you don't want
One
to
more
have.
item to add to that, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
So they also want backup for the PI should the PI, get in a car accident and can no longer work on this trial, right?
Or go on vacation.
Or whatever the case may be, right? But they need, I'm saying something more permanent, right? Where the PI is no longer able to work on the trial. You need somebody that can replace that PI. So it'd have to be the sub-IMD, preferably. And this has actually happened to us.
Yeah.
When a doctor says, I'm no longer going to work on this trial.
Yeah. But what you don't want is, you want to avoid, what these academic institutions do and have, 50 sub-Is when only 10 of them are doing the work.
Sure.
Because each time a protocol is amended, now you have 50 people that need retraining. Yep. And guess what? Something tells me they're not all going to be available to get retrained.
Yep.
And then these become action items. And
it's a real hassle to get the necessary information, too.
They become action items. They become very messy from a regulatory perspective. They become a huge target for an audit.
Yep.
So there's obviously have common sense. So yes, you can have too many staff. But for the most part, most sites are understaffed, not overstaffed.
Yeah.
They're going to ask about competing trials too. Let's say you're doing a schizophrenia study. So on the survey, they're going to ask how many schizophrenia studies have you done? What phases? They won't ask you for protocol titles, but they'll ask you for phases.
Yep.
They'll ask you if it's a study with that same sponsor or CRO. But they'll also ask you at this moment, are there any competing trials?
And
I always put no.
And I was going to say that. So I've actually encountered this a few times. So I always say no on the feasibility questionnaire because you can't really explain anything there that they're going to care about. And what I mean by that is explain, if you wish, which I do, when they come out for the site selection visit. So when they come out, they'll oftentimes also ask all the questions again on the feasibility questionnaire. Do you have any competing trials? And I'll tell them, at the time that I filled this out, no, but now we do. We have another one, but there is no real competition here, and here's why, right? Because the patients that would qualify for this trial won't qualify for that trial, so on.
Yep.
And that's fine. They're fine with that.
They're going to also ask what is your source of patient recruitment? Okay. Please, 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 please try to have a private practice affiliated with your research. It doesn't have to be your PI, it could be your sub-I, and put that private practice as where the majority of the patients are coming from.
Sure.
Right? Don't lead with advertising as our strategy.
No, it has to be a database.
Has to be a database. Now they're going to ask, has advertising worked in the past for you? And you can say yes, but it's not needed.
Yeah, 6 minutes.
6 minutes till our next call. Get your questions in now, because we have a call in 6 minutes. They'll ask about your CLIA waiver or CLIA certificate. Make sure you have one. You have to get one. Either a waiver or a certificate, right? They'll ask about your facility, and they're going to look at all these things when they do your site selection visit. But the key with these feasibility surveys is to get the monitor to actually come do a site selection visit.
No doubt.
Because once they're there, they want to use you.
Yeah, they already have time invested, money invested.
Yeah, they're paying CRAs money to fly on an airplane to go see you.
Yep.
Right? So the battle is getting them to your site for the site selection visit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then confirming those numbers during the SSV. And if you want to lower expectations, do it during the SIV. That's my strategy. It's worked well.
Sure.
Never pissed off anyone. Well, I can't promise I've never pissed anyone off, but it wasn't about recruitment. I've pissed them off about other things.
Yeah, sure.
Not about recruitment. Even on the studies that we didn't recruit well for. They don't expect every site to enroll everyone they said they're going to do. They take that with a grain of salt, big time. Okay? And thank you. And then the last slide. Remember, Amy says,
Mm.
keep a copy of the answers on the survey because CRAs will review and determine during the SSV and the SIV whether it's accurate. This is where you and your PI need to be on the same page.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
Anything else, Chris?
No, I think that does it.
Give your questions in. We have a service where we do the feasibilities for you. We get the studies for you. We do the contracts and budgets for you. We do the source documents for you. We're here to answer any questions you may have for you. We do everything for you. $1,000 a month, month to month, no contract. People have been very happy about it. We also have a Site Owner Academy, $3,000. You're a student and a member for life, which when I talked about the networking thing,
Yeah, it's great. Great opportunity.
Is what I envision this is going to be like the next way to network.
Mm-hmm.
Is to be part of these masterminds. And then that leads into conferences, which we're planning.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the very early stages of building our infrastructure. And then when the blockchain comes and your database is transparent, of course you can make up a database at that point. So there's always going to be gamification of strategy, but it's going to be harder to do. Right? It's going to take more effort.
They're already requesting things that it's not as sophisticated as a blockchain, but
that's next though.
They send out pages. Hey, list 20 patients that you have that will qualify for the study, right?
Yes.
Where it's just they want their initials and yes or no, do they qualify?
Right. We got another question. So basically, our Site Owner Academy, I think, is our best product. $3,000 for life. You can learn everything you need to learn.
It depends on what you need.
I think it's the best. And then you can network from there and pick our brains every week.
Well,
live.
CRA Academy is the best if you want to be a CRA.
Right.
Site Owner Academy is not going to do anything for
Site
you.
Owner Academy
Depends on where you're going.
Site Owner Academy is what I wish I had when I started.
Sure.
Yeah. Same with our consulting services. From the CRA perspective, how do you corroborate the information apart from investigating the site? You don't. That is the way you confirm, is by doing a site selection visit. The name of the academy is the Site Owner Academy. It's on the clinicaltrialsguru.com. And there's a tab on the page called Site Owner Academy. Someone has a question about when CRA asks about standard of care. They'll do this at the site selection visit. And in the feasibility survey, they may ask, what is the standard of care for patients with Alzheimer's at your site?
40% of the time.
Patients with diabetes at your site. So they want to know whether those are going to be exclusionary items.
That's not necessarily true, but they will ask, like, for example, what's your standard of care or what medications do you use, right? For example, schizophrenia, right? They'll list all the most commonly used antipsychotics and say what percentages of your patient population use each one, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what that has to do with. I've seen these where none of those medications are exclusionary, so I don't know why they ask that, but they do oftentimes.
Right. Another question: does the location of a site deter or attract a trial? Example: would it be bad to be in Anchorage, Alaska versus Camden, New Jersey? It all depends on the medical condition, and it depends on the competition for this study and for patients. So the location does matter. Chris Sauber needs to go. I will take any remaining questions or call it a day, and the replay will be available for anyone out there. Hopefully we covered everything.
I think so.
We covered like 90% of, is there a certificate? For the Site Owner Academy, there is not a certificate. For the CRA Academy, there is. For the Site Owner Academy, it's mandated to get your GCP, IATA.
Yeah, there's no need for a certificate.
Protecting human research subjects, but there's no need for a certificate to be a site owner.
Right.
You can have documentation of training. We actually are going to do that.
Yeah.
Have like a certificate of completion. It shows if an auditor ever comes that you did training, right? But it's not mandatory. If it's a hassle for them to get to the site, is that a deterrent?
Yes.
Chris says yes. I say yes, depending on indication. If it's a rare disease,
Sure. I mean, there's
and you're a site in like West Nestle, Idaho,
and you're 3 hours from an airport,
but you can get patients.
right.
They're going to go out of their way to bring you
if,
on.
If they can't find 15 other sites to replace you, right? Yes. If you're one of a few sites, they can do this trial. But if it's a type 2 diabetes study with very limited inclusion-exclusion criteria, yeah, if you're 3 hours from an airport, you're not getting selected. You're just not.
I like the rural sites.
But you still need to be within a certain proximity to an airport, I think.
Yeah. That's it. Anyone else have questions? Email us, text 949-415-6256 if you come across a survey item and you need help. Just let me know. Email me or text me, okay? Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for coming on. A replay will be forthcoming. Good luck to all. We got to jump on another call. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.